Leota.
Okay. So, should we? Are you filming?
Yeah,
already?
just start whenever you're ready.
Okay.
Yeah, all us out, dude.
So you're Diane.
My name's Diane. I'm the chief historian here at Bennett Place.
Okay, great. We'd like to ask you some questions about
Absolutely.
the Bennett Place surrender.
Sure.
And the first one is, can you explain a brief summary of the context of the Bennett Place surrender?
Absolutely. Bennett Place was first the home of James and Nancy Bennett. They would move here 1846. They had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. Their eldest son, Lorenzo, would enlist in the Confederate Army. Eliza, their daughter, would marry Robert Duke. He would also enlist. Both Lorenzo and Robert would die serving in the Confederate Army. Their youngest son, Alfonso, we're not really sure too much about him. We know that he will pass away in the spring of 1863.
Okay.
So as the Civil War comes to an end in April of 1865, we believe that only James, Nancy, and Eliza were here at the house. This just happened to be sort of in between where the two armies were at this time. Of course, we have the Federal Army under General Sherman, who was moving up through the Carolinas. Will enter into North Carolina the early part of March. General Johnston, who has been brought back into command of the Confederate forces, will go up against him at Bentonville. They will engage in battle for several days. At the conclusion of about 3 days, General Johnston will break away and move his forces further west.
Okay.
He will be in and around the Raleigh area about the middle of April when he gets the official word that Lee had surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse. Lee will surrender on the 9th of April officially. And Johnston will meet with President Davis, who's now in Greensboro, to basically request his ability to meet with Sherman to surrender his army to end the war. And this will occur between the 17th of April and the 26th. There's several communications back and forth between Johnston and Sherman. Ultimately, what happens is, while General Johnston is waiting for a response from General Sherman, he will move into Hillsboro, where he will stay at the Dixon Farm. General Sherman and the Federal Army has now moved into Raleigh, and there is a road that connects pretty much the two. There's a train station and a road, let's put it that way. Sherman will come in from Raleigh into Durham Station, and from there he will get on a horse and he will take the Hillsboro Road, which is the road that runs in front of our farm today.
Right.
General Johnston will leave Hillsboro, and he will take the same road heading from Hillsboro, and he is to meet with General Sherman somewhere in the area. I'm not really sure exactly where, but it is close to around the house of James and Nancy Bennett that Johnston will meet with Sherman. Of course, Sherman has a telegram announcing the death of Abraham Lincoln with him, and he needs to speak with Johnston in private. Of course, the negotiations that these two generals need to do is not for everybody to hear, so they will ask James and Nancy if they can use the parlor of their house.
Okay.
The family will then move into the kitchen house, and the negotiations will take place in the parlor.
Okay, so you would say that the reason that the Bennett Place was used was just out of convenience?
Out of convenience. It was a house that was located along the Hillsboro Road. Absolutely.
Okay, that's interesting. And Johnston's army, they fell back because did he feel that they were taking a big loss?
Well, Johnston, at the time that he will engage General Sherman, only has around 35,000 men out of his total, what we say that he had around 89,200 plus men. His army is scattered in multiple states in the South because the Federal Army is much larger and is surrounding the Confederacy, and so the Confederate forces are being asked to go in multiple places to try and keep the Federal Army from continuing to encroach and to move in. And General Johnston, when he is brought back into command, is pulling this army together, and only will have about 30-some-odd thousand men when he will go up against Sherman. What Sherman does as he's moving up through the Carolinas is he will split his army, and he will do what's called a feint movement. He will go further towards inland in the Carolinas and also along the coast to give the Confederate Army some confusion as to what is his objective. And he's very good at that, and that's what happens is there's many reports of Federal armies moving in and around the area, and so many of the Confederate forces are being pulled away from the main army to hit and try to figure out where is this Federal Army going and to protect major rail lines and supply depots and things. And that's what happens at Bentonville, is he will only be able to hit one small part of Sherman's army, and he realizes when Sherman brings in the other portion of his army, Johnston very quickly realizes he's outnumbered and he's got a very narrow window of opportunity to escape, to get away.
Right.
And that's what he will do following the battle at the end of the 3rd days of the Battle of Bentonville.
Okay.
And he will begin to move west. He is trying to get to Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee is trying to move south to hook up with Johnston, because that army, along with Robert E. Lee's army together, will be a much larger force that can go up against both Grant and his army as well as Sherman and his army.
Right. Okay. And then with the surrender, Sherman proposed that. What exactly was Sherman?
This is a very interesting phenomenon that happens. General Sherman, along with Grant, will meet with President Lincoln in March to have a brief meeting on the River Queen to discuss the end of the war, see how things are going. Sherman and Grant are Lincoln's two biggest generals, and of course he's going to meet with them, and he's basically going to tell these guys, get it done, quickly get it done. And unfortunately, at the time that Johnston and Sherman will meet, Abraham Lincoln has been assassinated. Right. So Lincoln's plans for what's going to happen at the end of the war, after it is over, to Sherman was familiar with Lincoln's second inaugural, and it came across as Lincoln really wanted to extend as much peace to the Confederate Army as possible, because only 4 years before we were a united nation.
Right.
And he wanted, I guess,
bring them back together.
Exactly. He wanted to be as peaceful as he could, but Lincoln does not negotiate, or does not tell either Sherman or Grant what his plans are. Lincoln basically says, it's up here, that's from me. You just end the war. You get the military to stop. That's your job.
Okay.
But when Lincoln is assassinated, those plans, of course, die with him. And Sherman felt that by helping to make peaceful negotiations with General Johnston, who has been given information from President Davis as to what Davis wants Johnston to ask in this term of surrender, Sherman feels that maybe that would have been what Lincoln wanted. So he will allow a little bit more leniency in the surrender. He will go beyond what is called a military surrender.
Right. He
will kind of sort of delve into a little bit more of the politics.
So he was trying to carry on Lincoln's ideals?
Yes, I mean, he pretty much felt that that's what he always basically said when he defended himself and his actions, was he felt that that was what Lincoln would have wanted. He was working in Lincoln's best interest.
Right, okay.
So, yes, he will catch a lot of flack for that.
Right. Because people just didn't agree with.
No, the new President Johnston, Andrew Johnson, who was, of course, the Vice President under Abraham Lincoln,
right.
On the death of Abraham Lincoln, will become the President and will continue out his term. Edwin M. Stanton is the Secretary of War under Abraham Lincoln, a very good friend of Lincoln. And because of Sherman stepping over his bounds as far as just doing the military, there was a little bit of...
Oh, okay.
It was a little aggravating, because Sherman dealt with things that he did not have the authority to do.
Okay.
But Sherman defended himself, thinking that what he was doing was what Lincoln would have wanted. That was what he defended himself. That is why this surrender is so very different than the one at Appomattox Courthouse, and that there were two negotiations, two documents that were signed here. The first one was on the 18th, which was the one that Stanton and Andrew Johnston refused to sign, but President Davis signed it because he wanted those terms.
Yeah.
And that is why Grant came down to Raleigh to meet with Sherman and let him know that the terms were not accepted and that he would need to meet with General Johnston again. And that is why the 26th of April was the third and the final meeting between these two, and when the final document, the final surrender document is signed.
Okay, great. Sounds good.
Okay.
Thanks, Diane.
You're very